For the main event tonight, we have Rich Mironov. Just to introduce him real quick, most of you guys have heard of him before. He's a product management expert and coach. He's been a VP and CEO at several startups. Have any of you guys been to Product Camp before? Anybody? Right, so he started that back in the day. And you know, Silicon Valley, I've been to a few product camps. Silicon Valley Product Camp is definitely like the biggest and most organized, so it's a lot of fun. He blogs at Mironov.com. You should definitely check it out. And he has this great book, Art of Product Management. His Twitter handle is @RichMironov. And he's going to share with us, like I said, the challenges of basically product management in an enterprise environment. Because, like I said, we got a lot of requests for that. And he's got some new material that I'm super excited to hear. So let's give Rich a warm welcome, please.
Great, thanks. And am I mic'd up? You guys can hear me in the back? Perfect. Come on, Bill. Let's see if we get this to work. That's right. Let's see. It's coming up red, but I think it's working. No.
Oh, that one?
Okay, well, we may be doing this, man. Oh, there we go. Okay.
It's clear.
It's a hardware problem, as we software guys say. All right, we'll turn it off. So while we're doing the hardware reset thing, oh, I see what it is. We're having some Wi-Fi issues. So let me get out and turn the Wi-Fi off. There we go, good. And to let you know, Dan actually graciously asked me to pull some existing material that I wouldn't have had to rewrite from scratch so that I didn't have a lot of work to do. And I ignored him. So this is the first time I'm going through this stuff, so you'll give me a pass if I forget what I'm doing. We'll call it a minimum visible presentation or something. And that way, so you can't see it, but I'm in the presenter mode here, so I can figure out what my next slide is. Good. So we're going to give away a couple books. I have a few copies to give away. Dan's going to raffle a few off. Anybody who doesn't get one and wants one, drop me an email. I own the bits; they're mine, so I can give out the Kindle versions as long as nobody reports me to Amazon and gets me in trouble. And just to frame this up, there's sort of three things that I've been doing for a while. I've been in product management since, fill in whatever your thing is, dinosaurs roamed Cupertino, right? Maybe 30 years at this point in product management. I should observe that really smart people do product management for 5 or 6 or 7 years and then they get promoted to something else. But the thing I do lately mostly is what we call smoke jumper VP. So that's when your company is sort of temporarily misplacing its head of product and isn't quite sure what they need, and I'll pop in for a quarter or two and run product and then get, oh, there we go.
Even better.
Even better, even better. Put my radio voice on. So I'll pop into a company for a couple of quarters and get things back on the rails and then help them find the full-time person that I get to give the keys to. So that's me. The gray hair is completely earned. Good. Okay. So I'm getting a lot of feedback. Are you guys okay back there? Yeah. All right. Good. So, and this is a chart I always use. Those of you who've seen it before, I apologize, but it's useful for me to frame what I think of as product management before we get into the lean problem. Oh, and by the way, if I turn this way, you can see that I predate the lean movement. Okay, good. So this is a sort of 3-part input-output diagram that I originally designed for engineers so they could understand what we did, probably 10 or 15 years ago, right? But it still holds up. And we'll just blast through it really fast. But if we put product management in the middle, notice we don't put it at the top because nobody works for us, right? But we've got sort of 3 sets of audiences here. And by the way, I'll put the PDF up for everybody to share, so feel free to tweet it out, but no reason to scribble this stuff down. So if I think of the input-output, the stuff that flows from product management to development is, we give them
requirements.
Requirements, good, what else? Roadmaps, good, what else? Due dates, yeah, begging and pleading. Right, there's stuff, right? There's conversations, there's market information, there's user stories if we claim we're agile, and MRDs if we claim we're not, right? They're not going to use them either way. Backlogs, personas, right? This is all a plea. This is an attempt to try to describe what we would like in the product, and because our engineers are smarter than we are, everybody tell me the proof here? Just ask them, they will explain that they're smarter than we are, right? This is a conversation. It's a two-way arrow because we're doing our best to describe and they're doing our best to help us understand that we don't add much value, right? And the thing that comes back out of development is product. No, actually it's not product, but good guess. It's the product bits. It's the pieces of the software, the naked software that's not yet a product because it's missing a bunch of stuff. Right? And it's missing all the things that the folks on the marketing, sales, and customer side want, because actually nobody wants our software, right? They want it to accomplish something, right? And so the marketing and sales folks want from us
Total product.
total product, yeah, but they don't actually care. But sales doesn't care about product. What do they want? They want money, right? So Nancy tells us they want money, and the way they get money is they tell stories to the customers that the customers believe about what our stuff is for, right? There's not necessarily a connection here yet. But the things they want, right, we want to segment the market, who's it for, there's messages, there's benefits, occasionally there's features. Nobody in sales cares about features, they only care about benefits, right? There's pricing, because if you let your sales force define pricing, everything bad is what you deserve that comes with this, right? Demos, qualifiers, right? This is all the stuff about what the product's supposed to do, not what it is, right? And what do we get back from sales and marketing?
Feedback. Customer
Yeah, what we get is feedback. That's a nice word for what the F were you thinking? And how come it doesn't? And what do you mean, but I promised it? Right? Feedback, right? So the next arrow is the most important one on this chart, which is if we sit in the product management bubble, the most important thing we have to do every week and maybe every day is reach over, pass through, under, around our own sales and marketing folks and directly talk to real customers and users and prospects. Because if we don't do that, honestly, we don't know a thing. And we'll have actually worth the quiz here. So a bunch of people who are at big companies here, right? Who's at a company that's got a large sales force? Good, okay. If I survey your sales force, as I've surveyed many sales forces, and I ask your sales force, don't cheat if you already know the answer, right? What's the number one reason we closed deals this quarter? That's right, because we have a great sales force. In fact, our sales force is way above average, okay? What are the two reasons we didn't close deals this quarter? Product sucks and price is not, right? So we know that if we survey your sales force, what you're going to learn, shockingly, is that they're great salespeople. We should lower the price and add thousands of more features, right? Not a strategy, right? And they do that because mostly they know that they're the reason for success, and if they didn't succeed, well, it must be us, right? So we need to reach directly to the folks who care about what we do and what the product's supposed to do, what the service is supposed to do. If we don't do that every week, then we're just repeating what somebody else tells us with a heavy filter on it, right? And there be dragons, right? Last thing, okay, so anybody at a company with executives? By the way, I'm at a company of one, which means the staff meetings are short. And if I've taken my meds in the morning, we don't argue a lot. But if you have executives, what are the things we as product folks feed to executives? Roadmaps and status reports and Nancy had the answer before. Money, but it's future money, right? We only talk to our executives about future money because that's the only thing they care about, right? The current money that we already have. And it's about what we're going to do to get future money, right? And so we're talking about strategies and roadmaps and all this stuff, but we're really shilling for more money for, sorry? What do we, we're asking for something, right? We're going to offer future money and then we're going to ask for resources. What kind of resources? Development resources. Yeah, maybe, but mostly development resources. So we are we videotaping? Okay, then I won't use the word I was going to use. We're representing the development team and their need for resources, because pimping's not a word I would use in public if I were being recorded. Because if we don't get development resources, we don't build anything, right? So we are the front line of making a case to the executive team that we need to build more stuff, and we need the people to do it, right? And if we do a good job, we get back budgets and staff and targets. The budgets and staff are for, what are we going to spend it on? Engineering, development, right? What's the target?
Business value.
Business value, blah, 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 it's revenue, right? But it's a special kind of revenue. It's the revenue we put in our projections, but it's 2 quarters earlier, right?
Yeah.
So we're in this dance where we have to be trilingual. We have to speak enough engineering or development that they don't lock us in the closet and disinvite us from the stand-up, right? We have to speak enough end customer that we know what it is that they're talking about when they talk with us, and we have to empathize with them. And we have to speak enough basic finance that we attach dollars or your favorite currency to the thing we're doing, or we get canceled, right? So that's the circle of stuff, certainly in the enterprise world where there's very strong sales force. That's what it looks like, right? And we all come at this from some corner or other. Nobody's born, right? Mamas, don't let your boys and girls grow up to be product managers, right? Nobody comes at this job with all the skills. In fact, most of us come at it accidentally, right, Brian? Good. But you got to manage all 3 things all day long, right? That's what it is. Okay, so enough about product management. Let's talk about lean for a second, right? Anybody seen a chart that looks like this? Yeah, okay. Blah, 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 right? Measure, learn, build, in whatever order you want to do it, right? We're going to try to decompose this a little bit and talk about why this is different or harder in the enterprise space than it is in the consumer space, because I think it is. All right, so there's a bunch of, right, there's the book, right? I'm going to call this consumer-focused lean validation for a second, and you can put whatever bullet points you want here, but essentially what we do is we try to find some pain or people who tell us about their pain. We mock up a solution, or we sketch a solution, or we do as little as possible, right? We try to validate it, right? Take your terms here. We're going to take MVP apart in a sec, because I hate it, but that's okay. We try to do some things to test whether that idea is one that would sell, right? We do some iterating. We try to do some early signups, right? So everybody who comes out of this book wants to do a Kickstarter project or an ask for the order discussion, right? They're not serious about wanting my product unless I can get them to sign for it, right? Is this the basic test? If they're not going to give me my credit card, their credit card, then they don't really want it, right? And we're going to stumble across every one of these when we open it up and ask the enterprise question, because we're going to have a lot of trouble with most of these core assumptions, right? Okay, so where are we going next? All right, so here's some of the unstated assumptions. Maybe they're stated, okay? For the most part, when you're talking about consumer products, you're either, the user is the buyer, or maybe the parent of the buyer, right? But there's a very, very close alignment between the person you're pitching this thing to and who's going to open their wallet, or use the thing, or spend time on the game, or, right, or. There's a very, very close association of an individual with your product, right? Straightforward. Okay, here's another thing that we all assume. We're getting into this game. We all assume there's a lot of potential users out there, and if we talk to a couple of hundred of them, well, there's lots of thousands and tens of thousands left for us to sell it to, right? Because it's a big world, right? Of course. So running a bunch of A/B tests, it's not a consumable resource. We don't run out of people we can do A/B tests with, right? Because there's a lot of them out there. Okay, and we can do all these different, right? We can run tests on different pricing and different positioning and different features, right? You've all been down this road, okay? Who's run an A/B test? Okay, shame on the rest of us. Okay, of course we can do that, right? That's the whole point. We're gonna identify that figuring out what people want is the really hard thing here, because building it's not really the hardest part, right? Getting into somebody's head and figuring out what their need is where we spend most of our energy, and I'll have some examples, is the harder thing, and we'll figure out how to build it once we figure out what the need is, right? How hard could it be? By the way, anybody knows, never utter those words to an engineer unless you're smiling and they know you're kidding. Okay, there's a lot of discussion that we want to get people to commit to buying something before we can give it to them. Right? We don't want to build the whole thing if it's the wrong thing. Of course we don't, right? We're lean, we're agile, we're whatever we are, right? We're innovative, right? By the way, anybody work at a company that does not describe itself as agile and lean and innovative? Yeah, one. Okay, but mostly those words have lost much currency, right? I have yet to meet any development team in the world that isn't agile. Now, some of them are agile, like 9-week sprint cycles, and by the way, testing happens later, and whatever, but they're pretty agile, right? Okay, so here's my example. I opened up iTunes this morning, and I took some clip art here, right? If I were, somebody tell me what these apps are? I've never used these apps myself, but these are dating apps, right? They may, in fact, be hard to build, but the proposition's pretty straightforward. Right? I won't use those words because we're recording. But flirt and hook up, I think we understand. Right? And the promise of this app is honestly straightforward, but it's unlikely I'm going to ask for my $9.95 back if I don't successfully flirt and hook up or whatever those other words are. Right? Because this is a consumer product, and if fit and finish is important, but we're not putting an astronaut on the moon here, right? So if I'm doing that, it's pretty important to know whether there's a market for people who want to meet other people by way of their phones, right? We'll figure out how to do it, right? There's data scientists here. I don't want to trivialize the really important work that OkCupid does that drives all of their press releases, because they have great data scientists who identify things and patterns in their data that they mostly use to convince the world that they're really good data scientists and therefore you should use their app, right? Good for them. Okay, so, but notice that, it's what we're doing, right? Here's a picture. Let's see if anybody knows this company. Okay? Somebody want to tell me this story? What's the name of this company? Dollar Shave, right? They have a video. It's hysterical, right? What do? Sell razors, okay? Deep technology, right? Okay. So the kinds of questions you might ask, my questions like A/B testability. Is this an easy one you can test the proposition of? Sure. Yeah. What would you do, Laura? Come on, you're the expert.
You could make a viral video, for example.
You could make a viral video and see if anybody watches it.
And send them to a landing page where you could then collect their email address and put them on a list to get them early into the beta.
That's right. And if nobody showed up, all you spent was the cost of the video and whatever self-importance you had attached to your really good idea, right? Okay, so this is ripe for A/B testability, right? The video, the slogan, the name of the company, the URL, the price point, the content, right? It's perfect. Because, if we have to throw away a few hundred razors or they arrive late, right? Buyer's decision risk. So if I'm a buyer of this, what's the worst that can happen? It's bad, okay? And? I lose $1, or it's a bad razor and I cut my chin, right? And I'm a lawyer and we're in trouble. But, not a lot of bad outcomes. I could pay my $1 and not get something and it wouldn't really ruin my week, right? Okay, purchase complexity? Not so much, okay? I either need a razor or I don't. I'm either too lazy to walk to the supermarket or I'm not, or I'm price sensitive, right? What's my success metric? So as a buyer, I buy this, and how do I know that it's succeeding? My cheeks are clean, and the stuff arrived on time, right? And I throw it, and it's a good reminder because I don't know when to throw away my razor and when the new one shows up, right? Target audience size? Huge, right? So if I go interview, and let's assume for a minute that this is very male-oriented, and because there'll be a pink version of this for the other segment, whatever, but I could interview tens of thousands of men about their shaver purchasing habits, and there'd still be a lot left, right? Technical risk? Not so much, right? Proven technology. Initially, they just bought wholesale, and they took a loss on some of them, and then they got into manufacturing or the contract man, right? No big deal. So the reason to go through this is because let's think of an example of a product where if we put up the landing page and we did the video and all the stuff, everybody in the world would say they wanted it, right? Anybody have that product in mind? Here's the one I was thinking of. Okay? So we could test this concept, and you know what? It's a great concept.
I'm for it.
Yeah. Anybody against? Okay. We're all for this, right? We all know somebody who needs this product, and we would pay nearly anything for it. But there's a couple of minor issues. Anybody? It's hard to do, okay? So the validation of the idea is not sufficient. We actually have to deliver the goods, right? And so when we ask the question of, A/B testability isn't so important, right? Buyer's decision risk is pretty high, because if the thing you're offering me actually is either bad or non-functional, I could have made another choice, right? Purchase complexity,
Very complex.
pretty high, right? If I'm not an oncologist, I'm not sure how to judge this stuff, right? And by the way, I'm not. Success metric, I think, is clear, but in the statistical way is not. Target audience is huge, right? Big technical risk. So notice we ask the same questions, but different thing. Okay, so now we need some we need some hunting analogies here. Okay, so when I think about consumer products, when we talk about the large numbers of potential interviewees, one phrase almost always comes back at me, and they say, well, of course we can talk to 5,000 people because, what's the phrase they all give me? They say,
Everybody wants
they
it.
say there are more fish in the sea, right? Do we know this phrase? Okay. If what I'm doing is throwing a hand net to catch a few fish, right? First of all, I'm not going to get most of them. And second of all, it's a really big ocean, right? And so in the consumer model, all I'm trying to do is catch some fish. And in some sense, all the fish are the same, or at least the same species of fish are the same. I'm trying to catch a bunch and learn what they are, right? In a consumer company now, we're going to scale up, right? What does scaling up look like here? Anybody?
Big nets.
Big nets, right? There's a word for it. It's called trawlers, right? So once we scale up, once we figure it out, right, we throw the big nets and we actually try to empty the entire ocean of all the fish, right? But we figured it out, and the individual fish aren't so important because in a consumer business, right, if I'm Amazon selling Kindle books, right, very large numbers of books, and it's really a statistical problem of how do we get more people through the funnel, right? We know this, so I call this is the growth hacking stage, right? We figured out what fish we're looking for, and now let's go get lots of them, right? Bigger boats. Okay, so somebody paying attention, we're going to need the enterprise analogy that's not fish. What is it? What's the enterprise analogy? And we talked about it before, so you're not going to give me the answer. Laura? Anybody?
Whales?
Sorry?
Whales?
Whales. Could have been whales. Whales is actually a good one. When we talk to our sales team about very large enterprise customers, what do they call them? Sometimes they call them whales. There's another animal in mind. Elephants, right. So when we talk with our enterprise sales team, we must know that there are a much smaller number of elephants, but they're really big, right? And it's going to take a whole team that wants to trap this one elephant, and they're going to spend 6 months or a year or 2 years chasing this one elephant. It's a very, very different story than lots of fish in the sea, right? But our sales folks are actually pretty important. Anybody been in sales? Okay, good. So let me first say, the folks in sales pay all of our salaries. So if you're in an enterprise company, be nice to them because they make twice what you make and they bring in all the money and they're never shy about telling us. Okay? But when we ask them how they see themselves, this isn't actually the right picture. So for a copy of a book, I've got a picture coming up that is how sales teams and enterprise companies see themselves. Anybody tell me what the picture is?
Big game hunters.
Big game hunters. Good, not it. Anybody?
Hunters. Shock.
We're going to get out of the animal world. I can't hear you.
Superman, superheroes.
Superheroes, close.
Hunter.
Yeah. Here's what I think every salesperson imagines him or herself as. Anybody know this one? Somebody tell me what this is. Always be closing. Right? First prize is? No. First prize is a Cadillac. Second prize is steak knives. Third prize? You're fired. Okay? If you're in sales and haven't watched this movie, Glengarry Glen Ross, and can't recite it from the beginning to the end, I question whether you're in the right function. Okay? Enterprise salespeople are the people who are going to, even if they don't act this way in real life, imagine for themselves, right, that they are the heroic Alec Baldwin. If you remember this movie, they were selling swampland to retirees, but different issue, right? So now let's unpack this a little bit, because for me, because we haven't gotten to the enterprise question yet, for me, the number one differentiator between companies that sell to large numbers of consumers and companies that sell to enterprises is that the enterprise companies have large, well-paid, self-important, killer salespeople, right? So sales is a really important function. It's in many ways the best paid, most important thing in the company, right? If you're the big game hunters on the sales side, right, you're pretty damn important. In a consumer company, anybody at a consumer company that has a very strong sales force? Yeah, it's really hard, because the answer is you're closing millions of small transactions, but you really don't care about any particular one that much, because they're all small, right? So if we take the enterprise story here, right, there's the whatever, I don't know what I was thinking about shaking hands with you, but it'll look good at the moment, right? So the number one thing that I see that's different about enterprise companies that are selling to big corporations on big, long sales cycles is that they have big, high-powered, expensive sales teams that get a lot of airtime and a lot of attention, right? And that's going to change the entire conversation, because in the consumer-driven marketplace, A/B testing, let's see which of these slogans works better, we can change the sign-on flow a little bit, do the experiment world, there really isn't a sales function, right? There's a marketing function, but they're paid like the rest of us on the overall result, right? Somebody tell me how we pay enterprise salespeople. Commission on?
This year's plan.
This year's plan, no.
Quota.
Quota of sales, individual sales, right? We don't pay salespeople on how the company as a whole brought in revenue, right? We may give product managers a bonus if you're lucky on that, right? But we don't pay salespeople for the overall good of the company, right? We pay them to bring in individual elephants or whales or whatever it was, or we fire them, right? It's my way or the highway. It's the the Cadillac, the steak knives, or you're fired, right? And so we hire, select, train, reward salespeople, not for the good of the overall company, but to bring in individual large deals, right? By the way, what are the key skills for a salesperson in an enterprise company?
Negotiating quota.
Negotiating quota. Actually, that is. Is that you? Who said that? Good. So I didn't think of that. If you can pass this all the way back. Okay. Then you're right. The number one skill for a salesperson is negotiating quota. I buy it. Okay. What are the other skills that we hire, train for, select for, reward?
To sell. Bringing clients to the table.
Bringing clients to the table. Okay. Good. Relationships. Referrals to get more people. I'm thinking of something more.
Close the deal.
Yeah, so salespeople tell me that selling doesn't start until the customer or prospect has said no 3 times. Anybody know this? Okay.
Closing the deal.
Closing the deal, right? So we're looking for salespeople who can find someone at the customer site who says yes, who can figure out the organizational structure to figure out who's going to say yes, who when they meet with the customer or the prospects, they take a long list of things that the customer said, I would buy if you did X and Y, but I won't right now. And then they bring that list right back to you guys. And they want you to check all the boxes so they can. What happens when we check all the boxes? They get sold. By the way, the best ones get to go to club in Hawaii and drink a lot and lord it over the other ones, and that's really important too in sales, in enterprise sales. But the point here is we have a bunch of folks who we have hired, trained, promoted, rewarded, and sent to Hawaii for identifying people who will say yes at the customer site, for understanding the organizations, for escalating issues on the prospect side when they don't get the answer, for manipulating the decision criteria, right? For reworking the RFPs. That's their job, right? And if they don't do it, we fire them. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's not just about finding people who say yes, it's finding the people who hold the power.
That's right.
And
That's right. And often the person who's going to say yes isn't obvious, or the person who has budget isn't obvious, right? So now, keeping all that in mind, let's have a little dialogue. Your huge enterprise, well-paid sales rep comes to you and says, I have this tremendously big deal at Deutsche Telekom or whatever it is, right? And all it needs is this one little feature, right? Teleportation, right? And if you say yes, then we bring $3 million into the company and I get to go to club, right? What's your answer?
I don't care about you going to club.
Yeah, but your answer is almost always
No.
no. It's not in the roadmap, no, right? It's just for this one customer, right? Your first answer is no, right? What's the next thing your salesperson does?
Goes up the chain.
Goes up the chain. Finds someone who can say yes, understands the organization, identifies the buyer. Right? We are shocked and surprised when the behaviors that we pay them for, promote them for, and send them to Hawaii for are the same ones that we encounter when we say no to them. We're shocked. Okay? So in the enterprise sales model, we should always expect that the good, great, highly paid salespeople who know their job are going to go around us the first minute we say no. Right? Because that's what we train them for. And if they don't do it, by the way, we're probably going to fire them anyway. Right? So you know, we must think about our sales team as highly valued and really important, but not well aligned with the product strategy, right? Which is different than in the consumer space. Right? It's an essential, in my view, essential organizational fact that you don't run into in consumer companies with millions of tiny users, because the individual user transaction doesn't matter. Right? You can test them away if you have to. Okay, so small numbers of customers. If you're only going to bring in 11 new customers this quarter, how many of those are you willing to sacrifice to an A/B test that might put them in the wrong direction? Okay, not so many, right? You could work at a consumer company at your next job. Okay, they're big ticket deals. They're long cycles, right? They're lumpy revenue. Right? So you may have some smaller deals that nobody's paying attention to, but there's 3 or 4 or 5 deals that represent 30 or 40% of the revenue this quarter, right? And they're getting lots of attention, and everybody knows them by name. Right? Again, unlike the consumer thing where you've got 900,000 people buying Kindle books today, and you can run every pricing algorithm you want to see how to extract more, right? Or airlines doing load management. Okay, let's keep going. Right, so this is, for me, this is the essential thing, which is there's not much room for experimenting, and the people at the other end of the table from me aren't interested in my experimenting. They're interested in my helping close the deal. Right? Okay. And the last thing here, back to win and loss analysis. The reason we win a deal that might take 11 months and have 52 contacts with the customer and 11 marketing pitches and 3 phone calls from product and 41 lunches and golfs out with the sales team, it's not so obvious which ones of those had the most impact. Now, if you had a really huge data set, back to our data scientists here, we could probably tease out, we could do some multivariate analysis and figure out whether the golf game made any difference, and I expect it doesn't, right? But no salesperson is going to skip the golf game on my assumption that it's not important, right? So attribution, which in the consumer space is in many ways completely obvious, this is magic, this is political, this is a hot button, because nobody's willing to pass up any of our efforts just on the hope that it might be important, and there's not enough data here to really do the science. So this becomes, I think, an essential part of enterprise product management. We know that we can't do A/B tests on all the things we want to do, just a few of them, right? Everybody with me? Okay, let's keep going. All right, so that's my Hello Kitty microscope. Right? Anybody own this? I don't either, but I found the picture. Okay, so when I think about the challenges, again, if we go back to the A/B testing and simple validation book that we all have, where does it break down? The first place it breaks down is we have very few prospects. They're huge, but honestly, we're only selling to 100 of the Fortune 100, maybe less, right? And we've already had conversations with many of them because there's just only 100 of them, right? If you want to interview corporate CIOs, right, good luck, okay? People pay many thousands of dollars to fly them to exotic places and feed them lunches and dinners and have them take out to golf for the chance to talk with them for 35 minutes, right? Gartner does that, right? It's really hard to get some of these folks in a room and interrogate them. You're going to be working on spec, right? Again, A/B testing on things like your corporate messaging, kind of a challenge, because in a one-year sales cycle, if you have a new message every 3 months, even for that one customer, you probably blew the deal, right? Sales wants to control every interaction because they know the product managers keep coming out with all these weird questions, right? The real decision makers may not be obvious, right? We'll talk a bit about complex systems, but enterprise systems tend to be squirrely and old and unique and complicated and non-obvious, right? And your thing's going to have to fit somewhere. You're going to have to figure out where it fits, right? And the last one, which I often see, is nobody's going to buy this thing until they know it's going to save them money or make them money, right? So you're going to talk about your factory floor automation software, and they're going to say, well, let me talk to the 5 other factories that used it and find out how much money they saved. right? So one, nobody wants to be first. And two, you actually either have to show or pretend to show hard dollars because the CFO is going to sign off on this $200,000 purchase order and would really like to know that it's a positive, right? And so this is much more so than I think than in the consumer space where people are willing to spend $20 a month because, right? Because they hope to, what was it? What was the dating one on the far right? Flirt and whatever, right? Right here, you're going to have a bunch of people along the way who insist on you giving them the spreadsheet. So show us how this is going to make money or save money. And anybody in this room made those numbers up? Okay, don't be ashamed. You can share. Okay, these are again different problem than you would have with at least a low-end consumer product. This is much more about a concerted or considered high-end purchase. If you were buying high-end luxury cars, you might have some of these. Okay, let's keep going. Anybody remember the sales funnel? Right, we all know the sales funnel. First, you get a target audience. They have to be aware. They have to get interested. Right. What's the mean time between the top and the bottom for an enterprise sale?
6 months.
Quarters, might be years, right? Takes a long time. Might take years, might take dozens of touches. Figuring out which one is the differential one. Usually either claim the first one or the last one because those are easy, right? And you've got to keep your message and your product relatively stable through this whole cycle because if you change your product and your message, then you have to start over, right? And your sales team, remember your sales team, really wants to get to the bottom and have revenue, and so they want to lock us in for a long period of time. Okay, let's keep going. Two kinds of meetings. Who's met with or talked with a customer in the last 14 days? Okay, good. Everybody should have their hands up. Okay, so there's two kinds of meetings we have with customers. Meetings, discussions, whatever, right? We all know this coffee mug, right? So there's one kind of meeting we have with customers where it's the closing meeting. Who organizes this meeting? Sales. What's our job in the meeting? Help them close, right? Usually, if they're good, they brief us before the meeting and they tell us what 2 questions we're supposed to answer.
Say yes.
Say yes. Well, often we don't say yes, but at least they tell us which 2 questions, right? And we're not allowed, so there's a whole series of questions we would normally ask customers that we don't ask in this meeting. Like, why do you want to do that? And tell me all the features you've been thinking about and which 20 are the most important. And have you looked at any competitor products? And if we weren't in the market, how would you solve this, right? And out of 10, NPS, how fun is it to work with us, right? Your job in the meeting is to close, right? Or to do your part and then get out and shut up and not watch the arms being twisted and the money crossing the table, whatever it is, I wasn't there, right? If you don't follow this, you're never invited to another sales meeting. And by the way, that's a short trip out of product management to some other function, right? So you need to know when you're in a closing meeting because there's a way you behave. Now, there's the other meeting. There's the lean discovery meeting. That's the one we're all thinking about when we came here, right? Which is not the sales meeting, which is the learning meeting or the listening meeting, right? And you have your, I'm old school, pad and paper. Okay, whatever it is, right? You're recording it, you're videotaping it, technology, right? But you set up this meeting, or the UX folks have set up this meeting, or somebody with an interest in learning has set up this meeting, because learning's important, right? Open-ended questions, digging for issues, new concerns, right? Tell me what success looks like, how do we make you a hero, right? What would you think about these 11 product concepts? Okay, your sale, go.
In enterprise, those are not with the same people.
They may not be with the same people, that's right. Ideally, we're trying to find the people with the real need, right? But if my sales team is in the room, not talking the way I've asked them not to do, they're steaming, right? They're holding on tight, trying to hold back, because these are all the things that derail late-stage sales conversations, right? And so we need to know where we are. If we're in a late-stage sales cycle, we're in that meeting. If we're learning, we're in the other meeting. Now, we can have them in the same time space, but we probably can't have them with the same people at the same time, right? Really important, because otherwise, go.
There's a third type, which is you get beat up by the customer for top slips or product not working.
Right, you get beat up by the... So there are many other kinds of meetings. I think product management is obligated to be the ones to stand up to the front and take the beating so the engineers don't have to take it, right? Regardless of fault. That's why we love our job so much, and everybody respects us, right? But it's really important when we talk about lean discovery, we can't be also talking about the closing meeting, right? And the reason sales wants us at the company is to help us close, right? They're actually not that interested in learning unless they're pretty evolved. And there are some evolved sales organizations, and the higher up, the better that should be. Okay, let's keep going. All right, every organization has a whole bunch of stuff that's already in place. I worked for Bob Epstein at Sybase way back in the day. This is a famous saying of his, right? A legacy system is any system that works, okay? By the way, I don't sell legacy systems. Reach your own conclusions, right? But every big organization has this weird pasted together, been acquired, been unacquired. We had SAP for a while, and then we went with something else, and we got 5 kinds of, right? It's a mess. It's a huge mess. In fact, I think I had some words here, right? I called it uniquely confusing assembly of old systems, right? Every big company is a mess inside. And if you're selling technology and you think you can unplug some one piece and put in your thing and it's going to work, well, then you have an opportunity to be in consumer product management. Okay? Right? Every time the CFO says, well, come on, how hard could it be? We'll just outsource it to some far-off place and we'll send them some specs. Right? We all live through that integration and it never works. Right? Really important to know that every big company is unique in its own way, and it's our job to find the commonality, because if we don't, we're in the custom software business, of which there's no margin. Right? If you can't build it for 50 customers or 27 customers, you're not in the software business, you're in the renting engineers business. Okay, last bit here. We want to displace one piece. I have a picture here, I think. Okay, here's our picture. Right, know this one? Okay, I have to come up and show it to you, right? So the animal, whatever it is, knocks over the milk bottle, which pulls the string, which knocks the sword, which cuts the string, which drops the guillotine, which releases the thing, and this goes over to here and hits the door, which moves the sickle and hits the balloon, and when the balloon pops, the shoe falls down and hits the octopus. I forget, right? I'm lost, right? Rube Goldberg was the master of these. So that's what your customer system looks like, right? And which is our product. We're trying to replace the thing in the middle, right? And so we better have detailed understanding of what this beast looks like. Because unlike in the consumer space where things don't have to connect very well, we're in the enterprise space where things are supposed to connect and never do. Right? So your product isn't simply a standalone product with benefits. It's in this weird soup. Right? How are we going to figure it out? Okay, so last thing here. I'm sorry? That was just a drink. Okay. The last thought here about knocking down our testability is, can your customers actually try it and see if it works? Right? So there's bottom-up, there's departmental, there's individual stuff like Xero, right? One department can get onto whatever ticketing system you're on, right? The other ones don't have to. One group can get onto Slack, or they have 57,000 other Slack equivalents, right? One team can move on to some recruiting system. One team can pick up, Google Docs instead of Microsoft Office 365, whatever it is, right? Travel planning, event planning. You could do that departmentally, you can do that bottom-up, right? And so departmental stuff looks like small business stuff, looks like the chance to try it out with a bunch of places and see if it sticks, right? And so there's our little plan. The big systems are all or nothing, right? So imagine replacing only a little of the corporate finance system. By the way, that's how they got where they are, right? Imagine trying to replace the whole supply chain piece by piece by piece, right? These tend to be big, all or nothing, right? We're going to change the corporate security architecture. We're going to move to a big corporate HR system that tracks whether we have diversity. By the way, we don't, but we didn't understand it before, and now we know we don't, right? And so you've got a really long process with RFPs and all this stuff, because you can't actually demonstrate a replacement ERP system, right? If anybody's opened the box at Salesforce, there's actually nothing in the box until you fill all the things in that you pay for separately and integrate, right? It's an empty box, right, which you pay a lot of money for. And we don't know what you need until you buy it, and then we make it work, and it might take a year, right? Anybody from SAP? Okay, they had this thing called ASAP. Remember ASAP? And that was implementations that took less than 5 years and less than $100 million. Okay? enterprise is often the place where they have to take your word for it because there's no real way to run the test. Okay? Which means their level of proof is much higher. Again, unlike consumer stuff where the risk may be lower. I have a picture. Anybody know what the California state bird is?
Quail.
It's actually the crane. San Francisco, they're all over the place, right? But, sorry, I don't know why it's here. I had some thought in mind. Okay, last thing, we're moving on, right? The last thing I want to do is I wanted to tackle directly the MVP question. So every time I open up LinkedIn, I see 72 posts about people arguing about what an MVP is, right? And I'm not sure anybody knows. I think I know why we're in the place we're in, right? So here's my explanation. MVP, any offering or capability that requires least amount of, right? We've all seen this explanation down here, right? I would tell you that in an enterprise company, the sales organization has co-opted the word, okay? So when I go to the sales organization, which wants to do what? Close, okay? Are they interested in MVPs?
Their customer.
If they're a customer, they may be, but not if they're a sales team. Right? Sales team wants to do what? Sooner for larger amounts of money, right? So here's my theorem. I would say whenever enterprise customers are actually interested in the thing we're building, sales and marketing will take whatever we name that other thing and translate it into, we can get an early revenue commitment if we tell them it's going to work. Have we seen this? Okay.
Yes.
And previous examples, so every example I could find, we used to have these things called betas. And what was a beta? It was supposed to be the customers could test it and see if it worked. But that was co-opted by sales, and sales said, no. Beta is where you've agreed to take it if it works, and we have a contract, and you have 90 days to either get in or get out.
With a discount.
With a discount, that's right. That's exactly right, because
It's not a perfect product.
yeah, right, I've been told. It's not a perfect product. But money this quarter is worth a lot more than next quarter because I don't know where I'm working next quarter. Right? Early access, we had these things where customers could play with it early, and sales took that phrase away from us and turned it into, well, they can have early access, but only if terms and conditions, right? Preview, early adopter. This is a language dodge. I don't think it's about the meaning of the words. But whenever I attach a label that says, well, this kind of sort of might maybe work a little bit, the first question we get from an enterprise sales team is, well, can we sell it to someone, right? That's their job, right? We're paying them to ask that question. And then we have this thing, which, by the way, has the word product in it. I don't know what we were thinking when we put the word product in, right? But if it's a product, what's a product? Something we can sell for money, right? So you're going to tell me about an MVP, and I'm going to thank you for it, and I'm going to start selling it because it's a product, right? Right. So MVP means whatever we can sell sooner to somebody, because why else are we wasting our time, right? So I don't see this as a philosophical argument between people who disagree about lean startup or lean theory or agile. I see this as a fundamental organizational challenge between, go.
So I see this MVP more of a challenge with development.
Okay.
As they get late in the game and they say, we're going to miss our deadline, so is this really MVP? We push this one on,
Right.
we push
Good.
this one.
I think that's right. That's a second discussion here. So from the development side, we're late, and we're not getting all the features in, and we go to our product manager and we say, well, which 6 features don't we need as much?
Is this really MVP?
Is it right? So MVP here is an excuse for we're late and we didn't get it all done, right? Which is, again, not about learning, right? So when you read the book, you were thinking about learning and experiments and least amount to get some information. That's not the discussion we're having with development. What we're talking about with development is we're late on a bunch of features. Which ones do you want to skip? Which, by the way, you should have thought about really early because you know we're going to get there, right? Schedules only go one way. So when you write down the 18 things we need to have, you probably in your pocket need to know which 5 you would give up, right? And have the team work on the other 11 first, so we might finish them, right? So it doesn't matter what we call it. We could give this any label we wanted, and as soon as we call it something that generates revenue, then we're going to be right back, I think, in the same linguistic game of, well, when can we get one to a customer who's going to pay for it, right? Okay, let's keep going. So this is some audience participation. How are we doing on time? Okay, so here's my thought, and I'll just take a couple of quick questions. I'm a user, by the way, of a product called Xero. Anybody use Xero? I love this product. I used to be on QuickBooks. Apologies to anybody into it. It's a small business online accounting thing. It does invoicing, it does basic bookkeeping, and it checks with my bank account to see what's in there. And it's designed for sort of 0 to 10 people, right? 0 to 8 people. I'm the 0 here. Versus NetSuite, which is
Enterprise.
bigger than God, right? Okay, so
It's Oracle now.
is it Oracle now? That's right. So anybody working any place that isn't Oracle now? We were talking about Hudson and Jenkins before, one of which is an Oracle employee. Okay, so when we're thinking about these two things, right? How do we prove out to somebody that Xero is a really good, very small, tiny business accounting package?
Try it.
Try it, right? First 30 days free, right? And what are the couple of things that I need to also give you besides first 30 days free?
Access.
Access,
Credit card.
some really good training videos, right? A starter onboarding thing, maybe the charter of accounts is defaulted. It figures out where am I IPing in from and it guesses my country. Right? There's a bunch of things we can do, all of which fall into the sort of workflow, UX, how do we get the job done faster thing for individuals, right? And the Xero folks, I've met a few, I think they're pretty brilliant at figuring out what works, right? And they can run 15 different versions of onboarding for 15 different cohorts, and they can A, B, C, D, E test their way to figure out what gets people on faster and makes them happier and makes them more successful, right? Let's ask that same question about NetSuite. How do we get people onto NetSuite? Anybody done this?
Slide wheel.
I was 6'5" when we started the NetSuite thing. Right? I'm sorry, somebody said Accenture, right? Somebody said Accenture and $15 million, right? Professional services, lots of consultants, right? Right? It's a huge endeavor. We better have good reference customers because videos are not going to do it, right? Okay, obvious, right? Same thing if we're talking about selling health insurance, okay? Covered California, that's for people like me who no longer work at a company with more than one employee. You can go, you can get health care, there's a website, you can pick it out. It's insufficient and I pay too much for it, but I can do it by myself, right? If I'm United Health Group and I'm trying to put together a health plan for IBM, right? For IBM's corporate health plan to cover all of IBM's employees, somebody tell me who the decision maker is.
CFO.
HR is one. CFO is probably the bigger one. Who else? Legal is going to be really important.
Compliance.
Compliance is going to be huge, right? And by the way, compliance is 11 different sub-departments that don't agree with each other, okay? CEO, maybe. I think there's a golfing tour in my outing here, right? Employees. No. Somewhere in here are the employees, right? I didn't hear anybody mention corporate security, okay? Are we going to have 2 factors not good enough? By the way, we're going to have 4-factor authentication for this, so we don't give away the data. Right? I don't know what the other 2 are. But the process of selling, of United Health Group selling IBM on a new plan when they're not the incumbent, by the way, it's only going to come around once a year, and it's probably a 5-year selling cycle, and you better promise a lot of savings, right? Different animals. So there's a group at United Health Group, there's a sales team that's going to spend the next 4 years trying to close IBM. Maybe not 4 years. If they get it earlier, they get to go to Hawaii. If it doesn't happen, they'll work somewhere else, right? But again, notice the sales cycle really matters, and there's no product manager who's going to be able to A/B test their way into what IBM wants. Ain't going to happen. Okay. Anybody work in enterprise security? I have. Okay. Tell me what the key benefit statement is for every enterprise security product. Not to break it even more. Good. There's another one. Anybody? In the back.
No more breaches?
No more breaches, right. Actually, nobody actually promises no more breaches. What they promise is fewer breaches, right? Okay? So every security company in the world, when in their enterprise pitch, has something like this, right? We're going to stop X% more bad stuff than the other guys, right? There's no other pitch here, right? We're all going to tell the same story, so therefore we can't hope to close just on the proposition, right? If you're doing corporate security, what's the next thing that your prospect does?
POC.
POC, tell me what that means.
They get the corporate...
Proof of concept, how long does it run?
As much as they want.
as much as they want, right?
It's about 1 to 3 months.
1 to 3 months, good. So they're going to take 25 or 50 or 100 of the kinds of machines they use, and they're going to put your stuff on a few and your 15 competitors on a few, right? And they're going to open them up to the naked internet. And they're going to watch what happens, which is all kinds of crazy things, and they're going to score you against all your competitors by how efficacious you really are. What portion of the baddies do you stop, right? Much more quantitative. So part of this that's really important, by the way, if you're in network security, as I have been, is to help the customers design the experiment. Why do we do that?
So you can control the outcome.
Right, because rig is a very strong word. Okay? Let's say
Show ourselves in the best light.
showcase. I like showcase. I would say apply great learning and experience to defining the success metrics. Because if we can figure out what winning looks like, we can win, whether we actually do more of this or not, right? So that's how they choose. And those are, by the way, the Intel McAfee is now one company. Those are the 5 largest players in network security, right? This is what they do all day long, and so they have whole teams trying to guess and game the problem of designing the RFP so that when they do the test, we win, right? I won't say anything about voting in Florida here. Okay, good. So last thing, and then we'll get some questions. Okay, so let's talk about good stuff we can do, right? So this was gloom and doom, right? Oh my God, we can't do lean, right? Lean doesn't work in enterprises because they're big and slow and we pay our salespeople too much. None of those are true. Okay, so let's talk about, anybody have suggestions here for, so what are in my next few slides for what do we do? How do we get ourselves out of this? Nobody.
Software as a service.
Software as a service. Well, that's, by the way, there is no more of anything else than software as a service, right? If you were going to go to a VC and say, we're going to form a new company for on-premise software. Really? 1995 called and they want their business plan back, right? There may be reasons, right? But everybody's SaaS now, or infrastructure as a service, or application as a service, whatever it is, right? AS, I think. Right? So we're all going to do that, right?
Try to make sure you can dog food your own product.
Dog food your own product. That's really good if you're building a product that you can. So if you're doing ERP systems and you build stuff, you might want to use your own ERP system, your own finance system. That'd be really good. I'm not sure that Rocket Fuel buys enough ads to dog food its own system. Okay, good. So here were just a few things. This is on the upside, right? This is on the positive side. The first one is you don't just have cloud apps, you instrument your cloud apps. Is this obvious? Okay, how many in the room have it as obvious, but their application doesn't actually get fully instrumented? Okay, there's more of you that are embarrassed. Okay, but if you're really instrumenting your app, there's things you can learn which are almost all late in the sales cycle or post-sales, right? The first thing is one of the very strongest predictors of whether you're going to close the trial is whether anybody's using it. Okay, so if as your number one success metric in the trial, you don't count how many of your target users are logging in every day or every week, then you're missing the point of having an instrumented SaaS service, right? And you can identify early the customers who need more help and love or golf because they're not using the service, right? Likewise, the best predictor of renewals is where the folks have paid you and they're actually using your system. Not the VP who signed for it, not the CFO who was promised a return, right, blah, blah, blah. The actual users are actually using your system. That's a pretty good indicator that when the 12 months rolls around, they're going to sign for more, right? This is where we start to measure onboarding success, right? So do we have cohorts of people who are doing the right thing and ending up as good users? What can we identify as the levers or the indicators for usage problems or whatever, right? So this is analytics later in the game. Often it's after the sale, right? Because they couldn't figure out how to use it first, right? And then I claim that's a non-vanity metric, okay? Is anybody using your effing product, right? And if you count them every single day and figure out who they are, you have a pretty good indication of who your users are, not just your customers, right? Because again, the enterprise space, people may pay you money, but they're not users unless they're on the system. Unless they're getting value. Because 12 months, 11 months from now, when it comes around for renewal, they're going to have forgotten you guys exist. Okay, next thing. This is a desk trainer's chart. Do we all know this chart? Okay. How much of the time a feature is used and whether everybody or only a few people use it? right? Really important, his chart usually looks like this, right? If you've instrumented your SaaS application, you can tell which features 2 of your 1,000 users are using and complaining about, and demanding that your sales team demand of you improvements, and wasting all of your time. And you can figure out which 3 features 92% of your users use all the time, and a little bit of workflow improvement or whatever would make hundreds of people and thousands of people happy, right? We're going to spend the engineering anyway. Let's spend it on the place where we have users. Is this obvious? How many of us are doing this on our enterprise product? As I put my hand down, okay. Laura, I know, would, but a few, right? It's completely obvious, and we're not doing it. And this is, here's the basis of Lean, right? Figure out what we're doing and improve it where it is. Okay, so I guess we're at takeaways here. And by the way, that's, in case anybody didn't recognize, that's a takeaway container on your side. Okay, so here's my takeaways. 1, product market fits in a much more complicated setting. Okay, enterprise is wickedly, bizarrely complicated and unique in odd ways. The simple read of, we have a faster database and we can just swap it out for your slower database. Nobody who works at Oracle can tell me that didn't work, right? I think the hundreds of A/B tests that you would run in the consumer space become very problematic, and often we substitute face-to-face interviews, right? I can't run the tests I want to run for the most part, so I end up doing 45 and 60-minute deep dive discussions with people and try to figure out who's lying and who's stupid. Who's lying and stupid, I forget. Anyway, right? But I end up having to talk to people because the process is much more people involved, right? Lots of pressure for one-off features, because if we could just get that one more elephant, it's a lie, by the way, because teleportation's hard, but there's a tremendous pressure for one-off features that you don't see in the consumer space. Okay, you got to understand the buying process because it's really important. Market adoption generally happens slowly. So all those hockey sticks, remember the hockey stick? Okay. How about a less hockey stick, right? How about what's the flat one, right? It takes a long time to make a dent in enterprises because their buying cycle's slow and their replacement cycle's slow, right? And then most of the metrics are usually either post-sale or certainly post-trial, because everything before that is salesmanship and positioning and RFPs and documents and meetings, and there's very little testable substance. Okay, so here's what we're gonna flip back to this in a sec, but here's how to find me. Anybody know the answer to this? How is it that you can buy your last name as a domain?
20 years ago.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So if you buy it 20 years ago, you can have any domain you want. So those with the Wayback Machines or TARDISes can do this, right? There's, 35 million people in the Eastern Bloc with my last name. So let's come back to this because I think this is the important one. Second, anybody who didn't get a book and doesn't get one in the drawing, if you want the Kindle bits, drop me a note. And then we have time for questions?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm all yours.
Okay, and the way we do questions, we run microphones, so just raise your hand, and we have 2 mics running, so just wait your turn. But first, let's give Rich a great round of applause. Tons about enterprise product management. I learned how happy I am in consumer. I'm joking. All right, cool. Laura Klein. Laura Klein's here.
Laura Klein is here.
Laura
has
Klein
a
is
great
here.
book coming,
She loves to have
by the way.
attention around her. She's spoken at our meetup twice, so she
Okay.
gets the first question.
She has a great book coming out that we should all buy. That
That's
isn't
right.
out yet.
Thank you. Hi. Okay, I'll just talk loud. Great presentation, loved it, and I'm going to fight with you about number 2 on there.
Okay,
Um,
good.
A/B tests and do not replace in-depth interviews ever in any circumstance. They do entirely different things.
Okay.
And this is, I think it's a misunderstanding that is really widespread.
Especially among enterprise people.
Yeah, and I'm super glad that you brought it up because they just, in-depth interviews tell you why something's happening. A/B testing only tells you what is happening. You should never try to substitute them for each other. And I would actually argue that you're talking about A/B testing early on in a way that bothers me. It is absolutely true that there are lots of times in enterprise when we cannot do A/B testing just because we do not have the data, and
Right.
it's not statistically 100%. You're absolutely right. We often can't.
But
However, there is this assumption that you're making, it sounds like, that when you're A/B testing something, that one thing is clearly better, and that should just be the thing that we choose to do, and we can't risk doing an A/B test and seeing if something else is better. But A/B testing isn't a risk. We literally don't know which one is better, so we've got a very good chance of choosing the wrong thing if we only choose one thing. So I'd rather test.
Okay.
So that's my
And
that's my argument.
I don't disagree, I just say,
Okay.
can we find, because we'd like to have
Yeah.
6 of each, right? Or 8 of each, or 10 of each, too.
I think you need something like 400
Okay.
Positives in each
Right, and
branch.
if
So
we only have
oh,
82 customers on our own.
totally. No,
Yeah.
100% won't happen. I think you can A/B test though in the product itself often for like things like offers.
Sure, I think once we have it in people's hands,
Yes.
then we have a lot of chances to do A/B testing within the product
Yes.
and make the product better.
Yes.
Absolutely.
But I would also argue just the don't substitute the two for each other. You can't
Okay.
A/B test your way to a good product.
I sure can't.
No one can.
I'm not that
All
smart.
right, I'm done.
Good.
That's my rant.
Somebody tougher than me.
Yeah, I had one. Having been enterprise software product manager for a number of different products at this point, one of the challenges that I keep running into is you manage to get some department to use you in some use case,
Right.
and then expanding from there to handle more use cases, sort of, I know in the sales cycle you got to work your way to the bigger decision makers, but also just generally, how do you do the expand phase of land versus expand?
Right, and land versus expand is hard.
Whereas
and,
with
right.
consumer products, I think land versus expand doesn't even come up that often,
Right.
so.
And I
it's just
think,
interesting.
I don't have a good answer, but let me give you a partial answer, which is I think we want to try to tear apart 2 different things. One is somebody liked our product in that department more than they liked some other product for irrational reasons. Okay, so if you look at, irrational reasons doesn't make any sense, but whatever. So if you look at every one of the agile ticketing systems, right? And you've got Jira, and you've got Rally, and you've got Pivotal, and you've got Mingle, and you've got 5,700 other flavors, right? From my point of view, they are mostly equivalent to the last, to the nearest 90%. And almost everybody either chooses the one they used last time because it went okay, or they don't use the one they used last time because they had a bad result for reasons that had nothing to do with the ticketing system, right? And so when I parachute into some company and I find that 4 of the teams are using Jira and 2 of the teams are using Trello, and it's a religious issue, right? We're never going to get there by the 4 of the folks on Jira explaining to the Trello folks that the Trello folks aren't as smart, right? So often the answer is that the products aren't well differentiated enough that it matters to the real customers, and so you've got what you got, and it's local selling. Sometimes there's a real barrier or a cycle, or you have to get in the pricing thing or in the price book, and it's useful to know the difference between my product is really much better, or let me be more explicit. It's not that I think my product's much better. It's that the users out there think my product's much better, and they're willing to go to bat for me in a way that costs them political capital, right, or budget. Because if they don't care much more about mine than the other thing, then it's some departmental solution, and honestly, nobody cares.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Yeah.
I'm being harsh. Go ahead.
The slight variation where the choice may be, the choice is your product or do nothing.
Right. Your product, you do nothing.
Or do what you're doing now.
Yeah, and do what you're
Your
doing now
product
or
has
do
got a
nothing
couple
is a winner.
But yeah.
It's almost always the winner is do nothing, right? And then the last part of that is there's almost always some department somewhere that doesn't use this system that has a real need to decide that there's a corporate standard for it, right? And that everybody's going to use Selenium for testing, because we got a corporate license for it. So all the engineering groups can line up outside my door and they can tell me what tool is twice as good as Selenium. But you don't understand because we signed a corporate license, so get with it, right? Because we all need to do the same thing because I'm important and I have a VP title. Never met that person. Okay, next. Okay, over here. I'm sorry, Jim, go ahead.
Hi, David Fudenberg. Excellent talk, thank you.
Sure.
As someone who's worked in both the consumer space and the enterprise space, I think the whole idea of the MVP makes perfect sense in the consumer space, but it's really not as important in the enterprise space. In the enterprise space, what's important is the minimal sellable story. Minimal viable story as opposed to products.
So I'll half agree with you. I think it's really, really, really important, and Laura, thank you.
Didn't hurt much, did it?
Didn't hurt, no, it hurt you guys. So what's really, really, really important is that we learn and we figure it out and we test and we call ourselves out on things that we're unclear on. The thing I worry about is when we attach the word product to it, right? So the minute we say it's a product, everybody on the other side of the house takes out their order pads. Well, can we assign a part number to it? Because I bet I can go sell some before end of quarter because I'm short on quota, right? So I think if we can divorce the intent, which is to figure out what the heck our products are supposed to do and how to learn from them and get the right thing, from calling it a product, we've not lost the battle as early as we would have if we called it a product.
Sure.
So linguistics, over here somewhere, go.
Yeah, I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about, I mean, enterprise, I get it, software enterprise software, but there's also a lot of enterprises that do consumer products, and I've worked in some of those, and the same issues you're talking about are there.
And consumer products customers.
Consumer product companies.
Right. So,
yeah,
so
that are enterprise size.
Right. So if I think of Procter & Gamble as my customer, they're an enterprise customer because they're huge, right? And the software we sell to Procter & Gamble, even though they're a consumer products company, is enterprise software to run their huge manufacturing and their huge ERP and their huge inventory and their huge diaper forwarding service, whatever it is, right? So when I sell to P&G, they're an enterprise. When I buy from P&G, I'm a consumer mostly, right? So I'm thinking of it as, you know, big ticket versus small ticket, big company versus SMB or consumer. Does that work?
Right. Yeah, okay.
Okay, good.
And then just one comment on the A/B testing, since it's been brought up in this row. My experience with A/B testing is it's almost always an internal struggle. It's not really to fix it, to understand the customer or the product issue.
Okay.
It's more internal between teams who either architected something or the sales team is, you know, signed up for something, executive signed up for something, and you're running it to literally just prove out what you actually know is in product or so.
Okay, well that's a decent use of testing. It's probably not the one we all thought we were going to do first. So
Yeah.
to the extent we can do testing to actually learn something and make our products better, that's a good thing. If we're just settling an issue because, right, we all know about HIPPO, the highest paid person's opinion, right? If we're running all these tests just to shut up the person who outranks us, my Greek history friends would call that a Pyrrhic victory.
Can I quick follow up on that? Just quick.
If it's lean, go ahead.
Have you seen historically in a lot of products you worked on, A/B testing actually work?
So I'm so old, right? So I worked on products before those two letters were discovered. Okay, I go back to when we didn't have cloud computing, we had timeshare, right? And we all knew these things, but we didn't have the tools and the numbers really to do a good job of it. So we would talk about it, and then we would take 3 data points and we draw a complex curve through it, and we make a decision, right? So I've sort of graduated up so that the folks behind me really know how to do this stuff. I just know how to manage them, which means talk a lot with executives about how A/B testing is important. Good. Over here. Good, right here.
I'd love to get your thoughts on how you do pricing with enterprise customers.
Pricing with enterprise customers.
Yes.
This is really hard.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm asking you.
Yeah. And I used to have more hair before I tackled it. So pricing's a real challenge. I think we all know that the first 5 customers or 8 customers, hopefully it's not more than 8, we're making it up, right? We have no idea what the real value is. We don't even know what the units are. And we try to write contracts that don't force us to give the same price to anybody else, right? But you know, the 2 or 3 things I'm always looking for in pricing. One is to make the unit of pricing match the customer's value metric, okay? So we want to charge per seat if the customers actually think of it as the number of people who use it. We want to charge on some other unit like mileage or weight or improvement, right? We want to find a unit that represents what the customer sees as value, because when we don't, we end up in these weird pricing places where the cost goes up unrelated to their value, right? So that's the first. Second one is, especially in SaaS stuff, I'm always looking for a feature ladder, right? The basic product has these 11 things, and the medium product has those 11 plus 6 more, of which 2 are only important, and you know which 2 are the upsell ones. And the advanced product has a bunch more things, and a letter from the CEO, and an invitation to golf, and whatever else, right? So that there's a natural progression to sell up. What that means is a lot of the features aren't separately charged for it, because there's too many features, right? And then I said I had 3, which means I need to come up with 1 more. I'm much more concerned about not changing the units of the deal or the terms of the deal than I am about discount. Okay, so sales reps will always fight me on discount. I'm more willing to let somebody else have the discount fight so that we don't end up with weird pricing on different units with different terms, with different conditions, because those can't be managed. I'd rather give the upgrade to the medium product for free than to give just one feature of the medium product to just one customer and have to re-engineer the whole back end to have a new authentication and authorization system for this one customer, right? So I want to separate the product health from the individual number, because the numbers don't really matter so much. One other thing before I forget, because I see Mike Fryer in the back. Mike took the first edit cut at these slides from me over the weekend. As always, he's somebody I throw things to get comment on, so thanks, Mike, for your comments on this. Good. One more over here, go.
So, great presentation. It helps a lot identify who you are, right? If you're a consumer company and you're a PM there, okay, don't expect the same things if you're enterprise and the other way around. What about the companies that sell to SMBs? That are somewhere in the middle, right? That they sell 8 to 80K per year deals, and they have an inside sales team. What are your recommendations to their PM?
Yeah, so I think of inside sales much more in the consumer-ish model, because in general, the inside sales people are more humble. They need to get volume, right? So the inside salesperson's got to close 22 deals this quarter, whatever it is, right? Because a couple of % of $80,000 isn't a lot, right? So the inside salespeople, if they're good, are much more playing the numbers game. They're much more listening to which customers are a good match for the product, right? So if you've trained up inside sales or they're smart on their own, they're making very quick sorts of whether the person they're talking to on the phone feels like a match, and they're discarding, they're throwing them out of the net, right? And so they're focusing on the customers' prospects that seem like a good fit for the thing we have. And so that generally generates a lot fewer specials, because we're not doing specials. If we're only selling it for $22,000, you get what you get, right? And so the pattern is much more of small rocks, small pieces, and you can substitute one for the next. You just got to bring in 11 deals this month, right, of a certain size. And so you're much more likely to let one go who doesn't fit, because you know they're going to waste your time. If you're the Cisco major account person who covers, Aetna Health, it's just the one you have, right? And so I think as you go down to SMB, it looks much more consumer-ish, much more self-service, much more online help, right? Much less, we have a 24/7 team at your disposal. And so that, I think, for me, and the channels have to have it really easy. If you've got channels, the messages have to be simpler, right? For me, that looks more consumerish. That's my bias.
And the few 200K deals that come, we need to deal with them.
Right, and the thing to worry about is that you've got one 200K deal which looks just like all the other ones except for the following 22 conditions, right? They want a dedicated support person, and they want these 2 little features moved on the roadmap, and by the way, they're in a different time zone, and so your support hours aren't right, and they want some special alarms put in, right? So the 200K deal starts to look odd for all those same reasons, because your executive team is so desperate to close the 200K deal, which replaces 10 smaller deals, that they're now following the shiny object, right? The magical thinking. Good. Are we? Go.
Hi, I want to get your thoughts on win-loss analysis in the enterprise.
Yes.
And the value of that.
I think it's irreplaceable. I think if you assign the sales team to do win-loss analysis, you've completely wasted your time. It's really hard to do internally because it's highly politicized. There's folks who do this. Alan Armstrong in Toronto at Eigenworks. If anybody knows Alan, right? Really, really bright. All he and his team do are enterprise win-loss from a third-party outside point of view. And they're really, really good at it because, honestly, nobody's brave enough to say what Alan will tell you the customers told him, right? No sales team's willing to tell you that they've failed, and often they have, and generally the product folks will blame the sales team even if it's product failure, right? So I would go outside, I would go to some experts, I'm happy to share contacts there. I don't do that stuff, but it really cuts through the chatter, right? Here's why we lost the deal according to the customer, because nobody in the room knows. Good. Are we got one more in the back?
One more quick one.
Good, please.
Great presentation.
Thank you. Slowly.
Quick question building on the previous question on pricing.
Yes.
So I used to work in B2C, then I switched to B2B. One thing that always and still I have a hard time getting my head around is, so we sell a account-based product, same amount of logins, same exact product to enterprise versus SMB. It's almost a 10x price difference, solely based on revenue of the company. So my question
and you get away with that.
My question is that normal?
So, please don't tell me the name of your company or your product. If I were an enterprise customer and I had a good legal team and a good CFO who cared about this stuff, and it was truly the same feature function, right, I'd have a lot of questions for your renewal time. Now, often what we do is we build a bunch of special enterprise features in. The hierarchical control over access, right? So in the SMB, everybody's equal. In the enterprise one, you've got somebody who can allocate, users down the pipe. A bunch of audit things, right? So we're going to invent, for use or otherwise, we're going to invent a handful of features that are the ones we use to justify the fact that we're soaking the enterprises for tremendous amounts. Support can be one. We have a dedicated support person for you, right? Ticketing, access, whatever. It's often hard to defend from really smart, paying attention enterprise customers who might just trade down to the other thing and leave you 9x short. So it'd be nice if those things were really valuable.
We'll take one last question.
One last
we'll
question.
break, all right?
Okay, over here.
No pressure.
No pressure. Make it a good one. I'll stay after.
Awesome. Thanks, Rich.
Talking about pricing, how you do the enterprise upsell. I've worked at products that have had a SaaS via the credit card or PO model, but then they also will have callless enterprise sales. What's the feature list? We have a rough idea of the features. We don't want to have buy 10x and then you get into enterprise territory. We want to have a set of features that differentiate enterprise. And I really would be interested in your take, because we do things like SSO integration, dedicated support. What does that list look like? Because I feel like that's pretty nebulous sometimes.
So two or three answers. One is, I don't know the first thing about your product, so of course I can't answer it correctly. Second is, you should know what those are. Okay, so back to talking with your customers all the time every week, right? You should be able to look at your enterprise customers and their demands and figure out what your SMB folks don't care about. Your gut is good, but your customers are better, right? You need to actually know the right answers to that question, not my right answers. As a starter, you might look at your competitors' products and see what they put in that and see if they make any sense.
Some of these are features that don't exist yet. That's why we're considering which ones we're going to be building.
So if it
User
doesn't exist
research.
yet, search.
User research.
User research, right, user research. I'm sorry, I use smaller words like talking to customers. Nancy, who's really smart, tells me that's called user research. Okay. I used to just talk to her. Before I built a feature that was going to be expensive to build, I'd really want to know that I had folks lined up who needed it and who were demanding it and were ripping my head off for it. Because I would tell you that at least half of the features I've built in my lifetime and all of you have built in your lifetime are pretty damn worthless. Nobody's using them, and the crickets are the only ones that you hear. And somebody is telling you that single sign-on is the make or break thing, and I wouldn't believe them for a minute, right? The folks in your company are highly incented to tell you that you have to have the next 740 features By the way, they're all number one priority.
Yep.
Right?
You bet.
And the way we earn our money as product management folks is we figure out, by user research for instance, we figure out which ones are really the 3 important ones and we order them 1, 2, and 3. And we stand up and we say, you can fire me if you need to, but these are the 3 that are important. If you know, anybody who doesn't understand it, come see me after class, right? Because we've got to lead, we've got to have a strong position, and everybody else has to know which the 3 are. Because otherwise we've got 30% finished each on 41 features, and there's nothing we can ship, right? So, you know, we can go offline and I can help you pick if you want. But, you know, I'm hoping you know which ones they are, and there's a cluster of them, right? Good.
All right, thanks so much, Rich.
All right.
Appreciate it.